Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.
Hello, my name is John Richardson, and you're watching the Richardson's Rubicon podcast. Tonight, I'm joined by John Forbes. He is part of the Freeport Campaign Group, which is a part of Salvo. Welcome aboard, John. How are you doing?
I'm very well. Thank you, John, for asking me to come along tonight.
No problem. So, tell us a little bit about what you're doing and what Freeports are in any order you see fit.
Well, I'll introduce myself and I'll talk about the group to start with because that's technically where everything all started. My name's John Forbes. I'm a member of the Freeports Campaign Group. We're all members in the group of Salvo, and the group was joined 2 years ago after a letter was shared concerning a meeting that took place. Well, the letter, the dated was the 12th of February 2022 between Mr. Gove and Kate Forbes. Mr. Gove representing the UK government and Kate Forbes representing the Scottish government, agreeing to signing a deal which basically created how the green freeports, they carry on the green freeports in Scotland, but that's the reason why the freeports came about. Now, at that point, there was a couple of members, Izzy and Graham, got together and thought how we're going to form a group to kind of find out more information, objective we can, and move forward. So after Graham and Izzy started it, Colette, Jan and Dave then came on board. I came on board after the first meeting in Inverness. The second meeting was in Larbert. I then came on board with that. Then there was other members joining: Len from Aberdeen, Chris from Stirling, and Alec from Annan. And over the last 2 years, there's a couple of members that have actually decided, and Graham and Stuart, they were both from Inverness. Izzy's from Fife, Colette Glasgow, Jan was Lanarkshire, and Dave was Fife. And the group over the last 2 years, we've lost a few members, but we've kept going. And what we do is public meetings. Now, through the generosity of the people that actually came along to public meetings, they give donations, so that allows us to book venues and do what we do, because we're self-funding, and we've been doing that now for 2 years. And in the 2 years, I think, including what we've done this year so far, I think we're up to about 15 public meetings. And what we've found in and what we do, right? What Colette does is she invites, she looks up and she invites. Oh, and Alan, there was another member that I've just remembered it. What Colette does is she invites every single elected representative in the area where we're holding the Freeports public meeting. So, for example, Sunday past there, every elected representative in that area gets an invite to come along. And over the 2 years that the campaign group has been holding these public meetings, firstly, the majority of the public know nothing about them, the Freeports or SEZs. And secondly, more kind of it fills a greater picture, is we've had one MP turn up, and I've probably got enough fingers on both hands to match the amount of councillors that have turned up. They don't, and then what? In some of the meetings, for Dunfermline, for example, we had a Conservative councillor, know nothing about it, but certainly went away going to ask questions. In Falkirk, we had 2 councillors turned up, and they actually were They were brilliant, and they went away and asked a lot of questions. But the general consensus is that the councillors don't even know about it.
Yeah.
It's a very secretive business, the whole Freeports thing. Now, that's the group. Now, what is a Freeport? Well, it's certainly not free for a start. In Scotland, there's two Freeports. There's one in the Forth Estuary and one in Inverness, Comity Firth. Now, what they are, do you want me to explain what they are, or is that what the question
Yeah,
was?
I mean, I've got a general idea, John, but I don't know if the audience would have much of an idea of what they are, considering what they're called. Freeport. It sounds great, but
Right. Well, there's right. Well, it goes. There's a little bit more to it. Right. First off, right, it's not. There's nothing being said regarding. There's no information coming from the Scottish government, and their silence to me is deafening. Because if there were such a great thing, they would be shouting it for the rooftops, and the silence is there right now. Freeports, right? They are special economic zones. There are two Freeports in Scotland, functioning in the same way as the ones do in England. So when they try and say the ones in Scotland are different, it's not. They've just got a different name. Well, the Forth has, with the green bit. There are no Freeports being implemented in Northern Ireland, for example. That keeps them effectively in the EU Single Market and Customs Union, allowing free movement of goods to adhere to UT laws. The Freeports are not compatible with this deal, because you've got regulated and unregulated. The ones in the EU are regulated, and the ones in this country are unregulated. So
right. So
that's
that's
the
why
big
they're
difference.
not allowed in the EU if they're unregulated, and therefore that would be a blocker for us rejoining the EU if we had unregulated free ports, which we've got.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To put it, to explain that bit a little bit more, in the EU, they receive government public funding to the detriment of business companies and conglomerates outside these zones. In the EU, this model is against their fair competition rules, right? So that goes against what they are in the UK. No doubt this was a factor with the desperate need to push for Brexit. Thatcher introduced free ports in the UK during the 80s, but they were not economically effective, as they had to comply with EU regulations. Businesses relocated from other areas, so depleted economic activity in the areas they moved from. It was
Yeah.
David Cameron who actually didn't renew the licenses in 2012, basically saying that they gave no economic benefit whatsoever. And then it was Les Truss and Sunak. Now, we all remember what happened to the economy. It was near decimated in 24 hours, and
Yep.
brought them back, and they've spread like wildfire throughout England and now into Scotland, because the Forth Estuary Freeport, for example, is just over a year old, and there's
Yeah.
still no information coming out of what benefit to the local area, because for the Forth Estuary, you've got three local authorities involved with that: Edinburgh Council, Fife Council, and Falkirk Council. And there's no information coming backwards to say, well, this is how much money we've put in, or how much money of your money we've put in, and this is how the return we've made. And that is the bit that kind of, it begs the question of why the secrecy, because if they were doing as well as what they were portrayed that they might be, then again, to prove everybody wrong, they would be shouting it from the rooftops.
Yeah, exactly. Shouted from the rooftops, success story and all that. So where is all of that?
Yeah.
So you've given us an idea of this. I mean, the size of these things. How big are they? How big are these areas?
Right. Well, I'll start with the one at the top of Scotland, Inverness. Now, the Inverness and Comparative Firth Freeport outer boundary covers Inverness City to Bora and includes the ports of Comparative Firth, Nig, Inverness, and Ardashir. And this one is 28 miles in diameter. So
20 miles.
It's not something that you could actually walk around. It's huge. In that, there are 3 tax sites, Invergordon, Nig, and Inverness, and 3 designated customs sites also in Inverness, Invergordon, and Nig. And this is the thing with them, is a lot of people don't quite understand how these things actually operate.
So, what would be the effect on you if you lived in one of these Freeport areas?
Economically, you would see no financial benefit at all, because I'll go into the 4th Estuary Freeport, and there's companies there that are closing. There's things that have closed. Now, the 4th Estuary, the 4th Freeport sits in the Firth of Forth from just past Leith to Grangemouth, so from east to west. And it comes basically, if you pretty much from Musselburgh to the south to Kinross to the north. And that one is 27.8 miles in diameter. But you've got to imagine what it's including is the city of Edinburgh, the city of Dunfermline, the airport, Leith Docks and Port, Grangemouth Docks, Mossmorn, Brayfoot, and you think of all the other wee industrial estates or big industrial estates, certainly in Livingston, there is a few in Dunfermline, so it takes a fair chunk of the industrial kind of bit of that area, as does the one in Inverness. And in that, if you take the 4th Estuary Freeport, we've all obviously seen in the news with the refinery closing.
Yeah.
The chemical side of things they're meant to be going to Belgium. Alexander Dennis and Falkirk, they're closing down and moving south. And with that, there was a company in Dunfermline that supply the panels for the buses. They're looking at losing a lot of, they're having to pay off a lot of people, because if they're not making the buses in Falkirk, then
They've got nowhere to sell the panels to.
Yeah, that's it. So it's like when you throw a pebble into the water, you've got the initial plop, but it's the ripples after that cause as much damage. So if, again, the Freeports were as successful as they're meant to be, then why are these things happening? It's no nice.
No, it's certainly not great, is it? So, far from having a beneficial effect, it seems to be having a detrimental effect.
Well, it's, the thing with the Freeport zones and deals, they boast about joint funding between the UK government and the Scottish government. But we know, thanks to Angus Brendan McNeill, when he was on MP and chair of the Business Committee of the House of Commons, that all the money UK government declares they're investing in Scotland. In the particular, these zones I've mentioned, whether it be the Freeports or the SEZs, I haven't spoken about, but I will briefly, just to the scale of one of them, that the Scottish revenue generated in Scotland. We also know that the Scottish Government agreed to cuts in the Barnett formula in successive years, although not explicitly declared. There's no doubt the same amount that the UK Government is investing in Scotland. So the money that's actually from the private, that are going to the private companies, is coming from all of us. The local authorities, they're paying it's all our money that's going into these things. It's public money going into private companies.
Wow.
And they talk about cuts and all the rest. Yeah, the kids can't hear a school bus. They're closing down swimming baths and libraries because the councils everything gets blamed.
They're all strapped, aren't they?
Yeah,
strapped for cash.
Well, there's a reason. There's can be taken. I can only talk about one because that's the only one that I've kind of. They're very secretive. But to take Edinburgh for example, they were promised 197 million in non-domestic rates. That's dropped to 107 million. So that's minus 45%.
Yeah.
They invested. When I say they, it's again, it's our money. £80,000, and that's now had to increase to £334,000. So that's an increase of 331%. Now, what they do with these things is they portray how many jobs that are going to be made available in the area. Now, in Edinburgh, they were promised 50,000. It's now less than 20,000. So that's a minus of 32%. But what they do is
It's
they create employment vacuums.
Sorry, John.
No.
It's about £15,000 for each job.
It's actually, when it works out, I've not got the correct figure, but it works out to a lot more than that, John.
Yeah, I'd imagine it would, but just on the face of it, that brief calculation, that's just like that's an awful lot of money for not a lot in return.
No, I don't see any. If David Cameron, if a Tory comes out with the fact that they bring no financial benefit, I don't understand why they were brought in, because it's basically the private companies, and these things are what the contracts are 25 years. And the Scottish government, they portray that they're in control of these things. Well, they're only in control of what has been dissolved. What the Scottish government has power over. That part of the report they can do, but all the important bits, they're all controlled by Westminster. So you've got areas in Scotland that have technically been handed over to Westminster, out with the control. So you've got the concern over an environment, you've got the concern with workers' rights, you've got the concern unchecked cargo coming into the ports. So that opens the door for people smuggling, drugs, weapons, you name it. It's been highly cloaked in a very, very thick cover of secrecy, and it's not as if the Scottish government haven't had the opportunity to tell people, because they're choosing not to. And what they are saying, obviously, is a very glossy explanation, when in actual fact, if they were to tell the truth, there would be a lot of people very unhappy.
Yeah. So you get the glossy version, which is it's going to create all these jobs, it's going to regenerate the region, and it's going to be fantastic. Look at all of this. And they're doing that on the back of deregulation, which runs the risk of lower health and safety, lower workers' rights, including minimum and living wage rights, as well as all of the environmental problems as well that could come with this. And all we've seen so far is job losses.
Yeah, but the other thing as well is that, although certainly regarding the fourth estuary Freeport, INEOS was awarded fracking licences. The licences are still there. Obviously, the government, put a stop to it, but it was they hit the pause button. They didn't hit the delete button. It was the pause button regarding these things. So that's a concern. But the fact that INEOS is pulling out, perhaps that now is no longer a concern. But you have the real concern of compulsory purchase orders. That could then, if they want to put a road or build a factory, and your farm or your house is in the road, then that is a concern that may happen.
Oh, they could just do it. They could just purchase your property, stroke land, and That would be it.
Pretty much. Aye. But that's where, these things, I make it very clear. My political choice is my political choice, but Freeports, SEZs, it goes beyond anything political because it doesn't care what party or how you feel towards the political thing in
No.
Scotland. It affects everybody equally. And that's the thing. With fracking, you could have worked all your life and you've got a nice wee house in the middle of nowhere, and then the next thing you've got a fracking rig at the back starting to drill, or the compulsory purchase orders. That is, I think, in England, but again, we don't really concentrate too much over the border. It's mainly in Scotland, but aye, it's things that could happen because we've not had anything for the government to say otherwise.
No. It's the risk, isn't it? That's what it is. It's the risk. So it would have been a smaller risk had there been the regulations in place,
Yes.
like in any other part of the land or pre-Freeport or SEZ. But now they've removed the regulations in certain areas to do this sort of thing. Well, that's definitely increased the risk. So it's high risk now, you would say. I would say, definitely risk.
They're basically tax havens because
Mm,
they're kind of classified as a state within a state.
yeah.
So the example of that is London and the City of London.
Mm,
So it's very, very complicated, but at the same time, there's an overlap between a Freeport, a special economic zone, and a city region deal because technically they're all the same. The only exception being a Freeport's got water,
mm.
but they can't call it all the same thing. It's because then people would become a little bit more suspicious. And what we're seeing is now, with obviously the traction, you've got David Powell. David Powell, what he does is absolutely fantastic. And the level of knowledge this man has regarding this matter is fascinating. So you can learn a lot for actually listening to him online as well. And we're
That's
slowly,
David Powell, who is known as European Powell on
yes,
Twitter stroke X. I spoke to him in November 23 to get him on the podcast, and we spoke several times on the phone, but then he sort of let me go.
he's, to be honest with you, John, I think he's a very, well, I know he's a very busy man. We've been fortunate enough. I think we've had him at two of our public meetings via Zoom. And she goes into things in great detail, and nothing's. But a lot of David's, he talks more he knows more regarding the English reports,
Yeah.
but the Scottish ones, there's no difference. What's happening in England, and we're roughly 5 years behind England. So when you think of the amount of money that's going into them from local authorities not coming back, you can understand the same scenarios in down south when the councils have been going bankrupt.
Yeah. So you think that's one of the things that's heading this way?
Well, I hope not. But when you look at every tax year, every local authority puts up their financials, their yearly financials, and every council's running at a deficit. There's
Yeah.
not one of them in the green, if you want to word it that way. They're all in the red. So it's not. It's kind of, well, I can understand the frustration of people when they find out about this thing, because the initial reaction is anger. Why have I not been told about this? Why do I know nothing about this? Everything starts with a why at the start of a question. And that is a major failing on the Scottish Government, because the Scottish Government, they've got a duty to inform people, to let people know. And don't get me wrong, they're trickle feeding stuff. And if you actually go to the government websites, everything does look amazing. But on employment, what they do is they create employment vacuums. And
So could you just explain what that is, an employment vacuum?
well, what they do, take Inverness, for example, when they were setting up there, and it was actually online that they were actually using substandard materials. The workers that were there, I think it was a high 80% actually came from England, because they were, and I'm not putting anybody Inverness down, nor the Fourth Estuary Freeports either, but if they're doing something specialist and there's not specialists in that area, they'll then have to import the workers. Mm-hmm. And when that's actually the count of the jobs that are created, and that's how they do it. Mm-hmm. You've got, when you're talking about the wages, you run the risk of 0-hour contracts, and with that you've got no benefits whatsoever. Could be overseas workers. That happened with P&O. They sacked the entire crew and rehired workers from overseas. And I think somebody back then worked out they were on for about £3 an hour. So the workers' rights is important, because we all deserve, you put a shift in, you deserve a decent wage for a decent day's job work. But there's all these different things that are just gelling together to make them sound absolutely horrific.
So now we've got this gigantically horrific story going on, John. Mm-hmm. What can people do? What can people do? I mean, what's your thought?
Well, and what Salvo did, the members of the group, I think there was 2 or 3 of them, I think, got a list of all the companies that were in both the Inverness Comity Firth Freeport and the Fourth Estuary Freeport, and basically wrote them a letter telling them what they were doing was illegal. Because in Scotland, the people are sovereign, and with that, the assets belong to the people of Scotland. So technically, it's kind of like your next door neighbour taking over your garage. You know, that kind of thing. So that's been done. Right now, as I say, the contract's 25 years, and without sounding morbid, there's a high probability I'll not be here in 25 years' time. So what we're doing,
but I won't be sober.
Well, you don't know. You just need to stop eating birthday cakes. But it's that. See, that's the problem. That's the problem. What's happening here is it's getting passed on to future generations.
Yeah.
And in these areas, there's a relaxed planning. So, you or I, if we want to build a fence or build a garage or whatever, we've got to jump through hoops through the planning department.
Oh, God.
With the Freeports, they're relaxed slightly. Especially now in a lot of the areas up north, and listen, I live in Lanarkshire, and the battery storage things, they're creeping up quite a lot. Up north, you've got the pylons and solar farms and the wind farms. And, there's a lot of local communities objecting to these things, and they're just getting basically, they're ignoring the residents, the locals, and just building anyway. I don't care.
The protests are getting ignored.
Yes, and that's in the that's quite a thing up north. And there's action groups up there that are doing stuff. And there was one thing I read, and I was actually very pleased to see regarding, obviously, that what we received with the councillors, the elected representatives. And I think there was one MSP, which then, through her hard work, I think there was 70 community councillors got together to start gelling and trying to do something about it. The question regarding you asked, I've kind of, my conversations went kind of like a Billy Connolly joke here. It's went a huge circle. It started with something and I went on to something else. But there's that much to talk about that it's quite hard to kind of stay on track, because it's easy just to I'll just take this turn left and talk about something else. But what we can do about it is start talking to your local elected representatives, start talking to your councillors, your MSPs and your MPs, and find information. If you go onto our Facebook page, Chris, one of the people, one of the guys in the actual group, he actually put a blog up, and he put a list of questions. You actually go, because some people may not know what to ask. And, and the problem with that is most people don't even know anything about them. And, like I've spoken about the Freeports. I'll briefly talk about the Glasgow SEZ, for example. Right, just for one example. I'm not going to go anywhere else with SEZs because that is an overly complicated. But that is overly complicated if you don't know what they are. Now, financially, and the benefits towards private companies are exactly the same as in a Freeport. But the Glasgow Special Economic Zone is made up of 8 local authorities. So you start with both North and South Lanarkshire, and that goes all the way across to Western Bartonshire. So you've got all these local authorities that are putting money into this, and that was, I think it was 2016 that started, and I think the amount so far comes to about £1.2 billion. It's all it is just it's the money's going one way. That's where it's going, and if anything's coming back, what normally happens is some area might get a new cycle lane or a new shiny roundabout, or a church will get a new roof or something. It's
piecemeal.
Yes, aye.
Yep.
So it's a depressing subject. We have the group has a meeting every Thursday on Zoom, and we're finding things out weekly, different things. And, you try and keep the meeting kind of upbeat, but when you start talking about this stuff and you're hearing about this stuff, you can't help but feel angry and depressed at the same time, because how it was allowed to happen in the first place, and why at the rate that they're going and what they're doing, and there's nothing been done. There's no as I say, I keep saying it, there is no information coming back.
It seems like, everybody thinks, okay, the land is owned by somebody, obviously, but this little bit of land is mine, or this bit of land is publicly owned, or all of that. And you think there's hard-won rights, such as employment rights, health and safety laws, all of that sort of stuff. You think these things are, immovable, and they're always going to be there, and you take them for granted. And then all of a sudden, since Truss, the rug's been pulled out from under everyone, and none of the normal rules apply, and nobody seems to know anything about it.
No.
And nobody seems to be able to do anything about it.
See, the thing is if you look at how things are in the country, people are too tired and too skint to the morale's been battered out of them, because they're that tired. They're working probably more hours than what they've ever done, because you've got the cost of living that we keep seeing, right? And the drive to net zero and all the rest of it. And I think that's where the problem is, because people are that tired. And in some areas, perhaps they're maybe no one to talk, they're no one to speak up in case they might actually lose their job. I don't know. But the fact of the matter is, and the reality of it is 0 hour contracts that'll be the norm, probably. And the fact that they'll be bringing overseas workers. But as the job numbers are created, they produce, that'll include. So, for example, Rosyth, there's quite a lot of Filipinos. So, say for example, and it is just merely an example, if there's 50 Filipino workers, well, that's 50 off of the number that they were saying with the employment it was bringing to that area. Yeah. So, there's nothing pleasant, and I'm trying to talk here, and it's one thing, I can't sit with a smile, because you can't smile when you're talking about this stuff. So I look right through your face all the time.
Yeah, sorry for giving you that instruction earlier.
No, but how can you smile and laugh when you're talking about this stuff? It's annoying. It is very annoying.
It is, yeah, and I appreciate that it's not the easiest subject to talk about. And it doesn't make for a very upbeat episode either, but it is what it is. So we've just got to get on with it. So basically, the Freeports and SEZs are carved out zones where there's little to no regulation. People who live in those areas will likely not benefit from it in any way, shape, or form whatsoever. The only people that will benefit from it would be private companies, and they would act as an employment vacuum, which basically means that if you're expecting to be paid living wage, look the other way, because someone will be coming in on a 0-hour contract and at a much lower wage, and they'll import those to do that job, basically.
Well, to kind of the Scottish government can designate areas like enterprise areas. And they, as I say, Thatcher had these things in place. So they weren't. Scotland had them. They've had them before. Lanarkshire, for example, was a food zone, just for an example. So, well, as I say, I mean, the designated areas like enterprise areas and offered devolved incentives such as business rates relief to stimulate economic growth. Right? Everything's said to stimulate economic growth, bring in jobs. I mean, the reality of it is, it comes with incentives like investment zones or freeports, which involve a combination of tax relief, stamp duty, or national insurance contributions. Custom arrangements, the picture changes. These aspects often fall under reserved matters, such as fiscal policy, international trade, and customs. They're all controlled by Westminster.
Yeah.
So that's the bits in. The UK government involvement is evident with the co-development of Scotland's 2 investment zones. The one I've just spoke about in Glasgow, in the northeast, announced in 2023, where both Scottish and UK governments collaborated, leveraging both devolved and reserved levers to provide funding and tax incentives. Now, the funding comes from our pockets. That's and that was said by that minister. It's Freeport to specific. They're a different type of SEZ. Further illustrate the split, while the Scottish Government has adapted the UK's Freeport model into a greenfield ports to align with its net zero goals, the underlying customs and trade frameworks are reserved to the UK Government. The Scottish Government can influence the design and local implementation, but cannot unilaterally establish or abolish freeports. So that kind of answers your question, what we can do. It's kind of not very much. Freeports without Westminster agreement on reserved components. So if the Scottish Government change their mind and say we didn't want them, they have to go to Westminster to get permission. And lastly, in practice, this means that while the Scottish Government has substantial authority to shape SEZs within evolved in the areas, it does not have full control. The creation of SEZs and often requires partnership with the UK Government, especially when reserved powers like corporation tax and, as I've said, customs and deregulation are involved. And what we spoke about at the start, there has been posts on X and some public discourse to suggest that SEZs are fully dissolved. But this overly simplifies the situation. Scotland can act independently only within the bounds of its devolved powers, and anything beyond that requires coordination with Westminster. So that's the other frustrating bit, that you've got areas of Scotland that the Scottish Government are no longer in control of.
Yeah. Quite galling, really.
It is, and you've got to. It begs the question, why? We didn't need them. So why? And that is, and all we're trying to do. The amount of information that we've gathered in 2 years, I would put you to sleep probably with the amount. I'd have to keep bouncing about with different stuff. But when you look at the news now, what I believe, COVID was a test case, not what was happening with the deaths, but what was happening, what they managed to do with control and with the PPE scandal. You have to stay in your house, which you all did, and the PPE scandal, where were selling bin bags with a couple of holes in them for ridiculous amounts of money. Now they don't even hide that anymore. They're actually doing it in plain sight with these Freeports, because they can't hide the fact that, well, history doesn't lie. David Cameron said what he said, and we can't find any information to say the other that they're actually benefiting. An opportunity there for the fourth estuary Freeport. How well it's done in a year. Nothing's been said.
Yeah. A great big money pot that someone's taken advantage of, essentially.
It's basically, if you've got a private company in these things, if you're moving into that area, you get all the help financially that you would probably that you would want.
Yeah.
But when you're just a normal person like you or I, we wouldn't see any benefit from it.
No.
And that's when it's our money that's going in. It's kind of like going into Tesco's and handing £100 over at the till and buying somebody else's shopping. It's it beggars belief. Why it was allowed. It shouldn't have been allowed, in a nutshell.
So I think what we need to do is we need to wrap this and basically say that people need to get in touch with yourselves. I'm going to flick up the notices again. So Facebook, you can search for Freeports and Special Economic Zone Community Group on Facebook and see that blog you were talking about, basically, that the chap had posted up. You can see that there and get in touch with fellow members there. You can catch up with them on Blue Sky as well, and that is freeports.bsky.social. You can find that on Blue Sky. Blue Sky's up and coming, so that's quite good. Instagram, I suppose it's all pictures on Instagram, but it's Freeport SEZ Community Group, and you can find them on X as well, easy enough, Salvo Freeports.
Yeah.
So
Because
suggest you along and getting them there.
Yeah. To be honest, and it's very hard because there'll be people probably watching this that know absolutely nothing about Freeports or SEZs. And in a short conversation, it's kind of hard to kind of take in. You can listen, but see, when you actually go into our social media sites, there is information there where you can actually read and digest. It's important. See, podcasts like yourself, they're very important, because through that, it's just like a public meeting. Without these things, then people will still be kept in the dark without people talking about them. But what they'll probably find is, when the default answer to a councillor is we don't get told anything. Well,
they should ask some questions themselves, shouldn't they?
Well, they'll know the people they ask better than what I would, put it that way.
Yeah. And they are the elected representatives.
And to me, it's just a failure of duty. That's what that is. It's like me in the job I do. If I was to make mistakes all the time or not do my job correctly, I'd boot my backside.
Yeah.
But
so, write to your elected representatives, local councillors, MSPs, etc. Ask them questions about the Freeports and SEZs.
If you go into our Facebook page, there is a bit that was posted there, a blog, and it was all the questions that you could ask, because I suppose if you know nothing about Freeports or SEZs or city region deals, you probably wouldn't know what question you ask. Now, it doesn't really matter whereabout in Scotland you are, because there's barely a millimetre of Scotland that's not getting privatised through the back door with these things. And that's what a lot of people don't understand either. And these things start technically south of the border, with the border region deal, which then creeps up. Just there's another city region deal before a Freeport, and then a Freeport into another city region deal to a special economic zone, over to a Freeport. And the people absolutely know absolutely nothing about it. And sometimes, without laughing, but I did find it funny. What we used to do before our public meetings, we would put flyers through the letterboxes. What we do now is it's basically all online. So I was in Leith, in Edinburgh. The meeting was in Leith. So I'm putting a flyer, and the woman walked down a drive. So I wasn't going to walk in a drive. I asked her, would you like a leaflet? We've got a flyer, would you like one? And she says, what's it for? I says, we're holding a public meeting regarding the Freeports. And when I look over my right shoulder, I could actually see the port of Leith. And she said to me, I don't live in a port, so why would I want to come to a Freeport meeting? Which I then replied to her, you might not live in a port, but your house is in a Freeport. And then at that point, she just, no, not interested. And that's the problem, because until some people are affected directly in their wallet or purse, they don't care.
So thank you very much for coming to the show, John. And
Thank you.
I've pasted the show notes together and I'll post it all up, and I'll put the contact details in there for people to actually contact you guys in case they want any more information on all of that stuff. So on that note, I will bid you farewell.
Thank you very much, John.
Thank you.
Riffing the Rubicon. The talk show at the end of its tether. This podcast was brought to you by a simple man. The website is at richardsonsrubicon.com, where you will find all social links apart from X. You'll also find the details of the next live show, which is usually on a Thursday at 9 p.m. UK time. There are many ways to take part on the show, from simply listening or watching, reading the show notes, leaving a voice note, emailing the show at john@richardsonsrubicon.com, arranging a fireside chat at a time of your choosing, becoming a guest, or calling in to the talk show during recording. You have no excuses, and we have absolutely no plan. Join in now. richardsonsrubicon.com.
Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.